Thank you so much for being here today. Feels good. Feel like I've been waiting for this one for a while, and feels good to have an in-person one in my hometown right now.
Agreed.
Yeah, and then we're talking about the other side of the world at the same time. But please, if you wouldn't mind giving a little background to you and your position with the company and kind of your experience traveling abroad.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, first of all. And it's great to get connected in Madison, Wisconsin, where we both currently live. And I had the opportunity to meet you through the place where we both work at Generator, which I'm sure you probably described in previous podcast episodes, but a global venture capital firm and startup accelerator based in the Midwest, but in 49 different communities globally now. And so I actually joined the Generator team back in during COVID-19 in 2020. And I am like, my pathway into venture capital and startups is a little bit more non-traditional. So I have actually most of my background is in the nonprofit sector. That's really where I spent the first part of my career, working specifically in adolescent health and food insecurity. And so I went to UW-Madison and studied gender studies, African studies, and global health. I always joke that I was a failed pre-med student. I could not pass organic chemistry to save my life. And I had to pivot, and luckily those three subjects were things that I was really passionate about. And so I ended up doing a lot of policy and advocacy work within the nonprofit space, and got connected to Generator via a friend who was working on the business development team at the time. And if you've ever worked in a nonprofit, especially a small nonprofit, then you know that you're required to fundraise at some point. You're gonna write a grant at some point. And so I built a lot of fundraising and grant writing skills, specifically helping pursue federal funding opportunities. And so I was originally brought on to the Generator team to pursue government funding, whether that be state, city, or federal funding to support our accelerator programs and services. And so that's actually how I joined the team, was actually as a grants manager.
Gosh, I didn't know that.
Funny enough, yeah. And very quickly, found out I could do sales. I mean, it's the same as fundraising at a nonprofit. It's quite similar, but it's different. And certainly, when I took the job at Generator, if I'm being completely transparent, I didn't know what venture capital was. Like, I was literally so in over my head, but they were like, she has experience, she just doesn't, we can teach. Generator, as you know, brings in people with a wealth of diverse experience. And so you'll get teachers, PhD students, you'll have people who've built serial entrepreneurs that work at Generator. You've got just amazing, amazing individuals. And so I ended up eventually becoming the chief of staff for the business development team at Generator, where I oversaw predominantly our domestic growth, but we were just starting to really expand internationally. And so my first international trip with Generator was to go to Luxembourg, where we have an investment-based accelerator. And then we were also exploring an opportunity in Freiburg, Germany. Okay. And then funny enough, I had left my cell phone on the Luxembourg is so small that I had left my phone on the train in Luxembourg, and within about an hour and a half, it was in France. Probably not even an hour and a half. So I ended up in France that same trip because I had to go get my phone. But anyways, it was an amazing experience, and at that time, Generator was still a young firm, and wasn't quite ready to tackle the international market at the current scale that it is now. And so I had departed for about 2 years to work for a Chicago-based nonprofit called P33. And their mission is to make Chicago the #1 inclusive tech hub in the country, really driving inclusive economic growth. And I was their senior development officer. It was a nonprofit started by civic and corporate leaders in Chicago, and the former Secretary of Commerce, Penny Pritzker. And the Pritzkers are a billionaire family. We've got J.B. Pritzker, who's the governor in Illinois, and they're really passionate and committed to the city of Chicago and Illinois more broadly. So about a year ago, Generator came knocking on my door and was like, hey, I know you're really passionate about international business, and would you have any interest in coming back and helping us invest more resources internationally? And I'm very lucky to be here today as now the current VP of Revenue and Global Operations at Generator. And so in my current role, I kind of describe it as twofold. On the one hand, it's helping catalyze innovation ecosystems overseas. with the concept of locals investing in locals.
Okay.
So how can we really cultivate and grow local startups in the community and support them with a network of local investors, mentors, and resources, but then really supplement that with Generator's global network as well. And so oftentimes that's creating a program in the country that's focused on startups in the country and importing new talent into the country. The second part of my work is actually focused on Generator's newest program, the soft landing pad. Have you discussed this one on the podcast
not
yet?
here yet.
Okay. Well, the startup visa would be a fabulous topic for you to cover. And you know, there's different visa programs, as you know, in Fukuoka and in Dubai and other parts of the world. And so now with Generator kind of launching the soft landing pad focused on helping international entrepreneurs come to the United States, build their company here, and get to pursue citizenship and long-term residency in the United States as part of that. And the messaging that I've really been focused on, because I focus on the international partnerships necessary to bring those entrepreneurs to the United States, is how can we create foreign direct investment in both communities? So the idea is that you're not necessarily, you know, uprooting your headquarters from your home country in, let's say, Singapore. Bad example, but let's say in Singapore, and then moving it to the United States. The idea is that you're maintaining your headquarters in Singapore and launching a new branch in the United States, and perhaps a founding member of your team is willing and interested in pursuing residency and citizenship in the US. And now you're creating companies, jobs and economic impact in both communities. And so we're fostering partnerships with several states such as Wisconsin, Alabama, and North Dakota in our pilot phase, and building partnerships, most recently, for example, between the state of Wisconsin and Hessen, Germany. And now what we're able to do is reserve several of our seats in our Wisconsin-based accelerators for founders from Hesse, which covers the Frankfurt area. Which is really exciting. And so I'm really looking forward to building more of those partnerships with trade organizations and embassies to help foster kind of the exchange of innovation and entrepreneurship. So that was a very long-winded way of answering your question.
Needed. Yes.
But that's why
that gives a lot of good context as to, like, you know, who you are, and that's awesome. I love it. A little side tangent.
Yes.
Give me a quick rundown of, like, all the places you've traveled.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because I feel like every time I need to, like, DM you on Slack or something, it's traveling, like, on the plane, you know, so, like, you're always, like, you must have a million miles, you know, right now.
I'm working on it. You know what, up until the last probably 2 years, I wasn't really paying attention to that stuff, and now I'm, like, really trying to fly particular airlines. I will say, getting the opportunity to go to the United, UAE and other parts of the Middle East, I really want to fly Emirates more because it's a fabulous airline, and I'll probably talk a little bit about them later. But so I started traveling. So I am an immigrant to the United States originally. I came to the U.S. When I was very young, about less than a year old. My family is originally from Syria, and I'm of Palestinian and Syrian descent. And so being an immigrant, coming from a family from overseas, I've always been really passionate and always had a very global mindset. And so my first time traveling overseas was actually as part of a French exchange program. And I had the opportunity to host a French exchange student in high school, and then I went and stayed with their family in France over the summer. And that was an incredible program that was facilitated through my high school, and that pretty much opened the door to, like, my love of international travel. And my mother is a world traveler herself, and certainly encouraged us to experience the globe. And so that was really my entry point. And then in college, I had the opportunity to study at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And so when I was there, I traveled throughout Southern Africa. So I've been to places like Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Rwanda, Tanzania. And that was, incredible experience. And then it was when I graduated college, I decided I wanted to explore Europe, and had the opportunity to go to places like France. I've been to multiple times, Italy, Denmark, Switzerland. Where else did I go? I've been quite a few places that I'm losing track of. And then most recently, I've really been able to voyage back into the Middle East and Asia. So I had the opportunity to go to Japan late 2024 and went to...
Was that your first time?
That was my first time, and it was incredible. I went to Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya. And at that time, they were launching Station AI, which is modeled off of Station F in Paris, the original. And that was an amazing ceremony. But I have to go back to Japan. I know we're not here to talk about Japan, but my goal is when I go back to go to Okinawa and Kyoto is like top of my list.
You got to go to Kyoto whenever you go. Let me know. I've got like 3 or 4 different tips for you. Like for everybody watching, don't take this advice because I don't want to have a crowded area. But you have to get to the temples like very early, like right as the sun's coming up, or else they just get crazy packed. Like the videos I've seen right now are people are just shoulder to shoulder, like trying. Like you're climbing up stair by stair to get to this thing. But if you go like very early in the morning, I got very lucky that I woke up by accident like 5 a.m. And I was like, let's go see what's happening right now. And it's such a safe place. Like there's no like gates closing things. There's nothing's like locked or whatever. So you just walk around the temples, so like be respectful, you know, but like you just walk up and down. And there's a few people early morning. I ran into this old guy. His Japanese was his English was just good enough, and my Japanese was just good enough that we could like communicate with each other. And we were just walked up and down these hills for like probably 2 miles together, and it was a great, like unforgettable experience. So he gave me his business card, and I forget what they're called, but in Japan to like sign things, you need not only your signature but like a stamp of like your seal, and he custom makes those in his spare time now that he's retired. So that's so cool. So I need to go and like buy one from him one day.
That's incredible. You absolutely should.
Yeah. So, but again, we're not here to talk about Japan. We're here to talk about Dubai and UAE. So
yes. So then, most recently, to kind of bring us full circle here, I had the opportunity to join a trade mission trip with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, who's an amazing partner to Generator in supporting many of our accelerators across the state. And we had the opportunity to go to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Sharjah, which are 3 of the Emirates that make up the 7 Emirates of the United Arab Emirates.
Before we move on, break that down. Emirates. For people who don't know, what is an Emirate and how are they governed or separated?
Absolutely, yes. So the Emirates, or United Arab Emirates, exists as one country. However, it's made up of 7 Emirates. And essentially, it's a elective monarchy that kind of rules the country. And then for each of the Emirates, there's a different royal family and kind of sheikh that's essentially oversees most of the business and economic activities and kind of oversight of that region. Gotcha. And so the capital of the United Arab Emirates currently is Abu Dhabi, but the largest city and kind of most populous city at the moment is Dubai, and that's the one that you're really hearing about. But funny enough, most recently I went back and watched Sex and the City 2, I think is the one, and it's set in Abu Dhabi.
Oh.
Yeah, which is why I watched it, because I was like, I'm so curious to hear what their experience was.
I was wondering if you were going to tie that in, or like, where does Sex and the City 2 come into?
And I think back then, like I would say maybe even 10 years ago, Abu Dhabi was the place to be, and it's been very interesting to see that narrative shifts to Dubai, although, I mean, don't get me wrong, Abu Dhabi is still actively competing with Dubai to kind of take that #1 spot. And then I would say the third kind of most significant emirate would be Sharjah. And then the others are much smaller, and kind of Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Sharjah are all kind of within an hour and a half to 2 hours of each other by car.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's not a very large place in the Middle East. But you have Oman, Saudi Arabia, Iran as some of the countries that it borders, and then the Persian Gulf. One of the most interesting things about a place like the Middle East, and specifically the UAE and Dubai. So I learned recently that Dubai's airport is the busiest international airport.
I didn't know that.
Which I didn't know either. And you can get to 2/3 of the world within an 8-hour flight from Dubai.
Yeah, I guess it is kind of central, like right there in between Europe and Asia.
Exactly, and Africa. So it's kind of, it's considered this corridor between the East and the West. But also, again, to Africa. So these really important continents and countries for business and trade and export and what have you. And so it's really becoming such a central place. And I think there's many strategic reasons for it to be a hub of venture capital and startups in the Middle East. And currently 1/3 of all investors in the MENA region are based in Dubai.
Gotcha.
So that I think tells you something.
Nice, I like it. So before we move on to the startup and VC area of it, what do you think has been the cause of why it's like the focus has switched from Abu Dhabi to Dubai? Has it been just like investment in infrastructure or investment in general?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, you're just seeing a ton of investment in the infrastructure, in the programming, in the ease of doing business in these places. So Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Sharjah will kind of each market themselves in different ways to kind of attract companies and have their own soft landing programs, as they call them themselves, to support startups and landing there. And I think for Dubai, I think that you just have unparalleled investment and the pace at which they've been building. I mean, so much of the city was, some of the newest and most vibrant attractions were built in the last 5 to 10 years. Yeah. And you're really seeing, I think a huge issue too was public roads and kind of just the transport infrastructure was an issue. And you're still seeing some of that today. People will complain about the traffic, and there's a few parts of the city that do get really clogged up, and even the roads between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, because a lot of folks in business will travel between those two.
You said it's only like an hour and a half.
Exactly. And so I think that Dubai is becoming much more attractive, I think, for investors and for startups and soft landing. But Sharjah, again, the third largest emirate, is really is trying to quickly compete, but is offering a different lifestyle, right? In saying that, hey, if you don't, because other parts of the Middle East, this tall skyscrapers and hustle and bustle of the city life is actually not how the cities in the Middle East were designed, right? You have kind of more desert-based communities, Bedouin communities. The buildings are lower to the ground. They're kind of created so that they can provide cooling during the summer months and such. Like in Oman, if you ever go to Oman, I haven't been there, but from what I've heard, like their skyline is so small and very short, but that's by design.
They've done that by design. I heard that.
Exactly. Sharjah is trying to kind of maintain some of that kind of aspects of the traditional lifestyle of the GCC and kind of the way that the buildings are structured and different things, while still continue to compete for startups and for investment and things like that.
One kind of like, I don't know if it's a myth or like preconception or whatever, but like I think when most Americans think about Dubai and the UAE, they think, oh, I need to be incredibly rich to live in Dubai. Could you talk to me about that? What I know you don't like live in Dubai at all, but like I think from what we see, at least on Instagram and social media, it's easy to see, oh, like only the multi-millionaires are living there. So like how could a startup founder possibly afford to live in some place like Dubai?
Great question. And you're not entirely wrong about that misconception. In many ways, it might be an accurate perception in that we are seeing a great number of billionaires moving to the UAE and Dubai, especially of other Arab nationals from other places, kind of seeing it as kind of the best place for them to land. However, especially for startup founders, so I'm not going to sit here and act like the cost of living in Dubai is cheap. It's not. Yeah. However, I would compare it to any other kind of large metropolis, whether you be in Tokyo, London, New York, and LA, probably still more expensive, right? But the cost of living is higher. However, you're getting a higher quality of life. I think in some cases you might be in New York and paying a very high cost of living, but not getting that same quality of life. Yeah. Where you have great healthcare infrastructure, you've got great school systems in the UAE. And so there's many reasons that despite paying a higher cost, you are seeing great public benefit from that. Now, in terms of startups, they're, again, really trying to do as much as possible to reduce the fees and kind of costs of building a business, and also just expanding for the first few years in the UAE. And so, for example, with the free zones, or with organizations such as DTech, which operates in one of the Dubai free zones, or In5, who helps many companies soft land in the country, they are providing different incentives. They have, from 100% foreign ownership to different tax incentives, regulatory incentives. They subsidize a lot of the costs for you. So your rent and office space will be subsidized. Nice. If you hire any Emirati nationals, that also helps kind of subsidize and reduce your payroll costs. Nice. So there's a ton of incentives, and many of the startups are receiving those benefits 2 to 3 years after launching in the market. To really get that stickiness and sustainability there. And then, on top of that, you have great talent attraction. So you've got a lot of talent that's already coming into the country from both Asia and Europe, as well as obviously plenty of Arab nationals. Interestingly, in the UAE, Emiratis are only about 11% of the population. So very, very small, yeah.
Wow.
The second, kind of the largest population is still Arab nationals.
Yeah.
Which we've got a huge Indian and Pakistani population there, and lots of seeing tons of folks from Europe.
Yeah.
So the national, the national language is still Arabic. However, the predominant language for business is English.
Gotcha. That's fascinating. You see, it's 11% that are, Emirates people, but because it's almost the opposite. I was shocked when I heard that 10% of Singapore's population drives in from Malaysia every day to work, and then they drive back home to Malaysia. And you're like, okay, 10% of the population is huge.
Yeah.
Here we if 30 million people cross the Texas-Mexican border every day, that would be insane. To see that moving.
Well, here's a fun fact for you, because I was really trying to do my research for this podcast. That I found really fascinating. So the total population of the Emirates is only about 11 million, and there's about 3 million of that is in Dubai. They, on an annual basis, have more people flying in and out of Dubai than they have living in the actual country.
Sheesh.
Because of how busy their international airport is, DXB, which is a beautiful airport, by the way. Really nice airport. And I will also note, for some cases as well, and to be eligible, obviously being such a small and minority in the country, there are in some cases hiring requirements that you must hire an Emirati, and you'll see that even in Saudi, where you'll be required to have a Saudi national to receive certain grants or
Gotcha.
be eligible for certain subsidies and incentives, or to underwrite loans and things like that. So it's something to keep in mind depending on what type of a business you're building and what might be some of the local requirements in order to unlock those incentives. But I mean, one of the most fascinatingly diverse places in the world, and for any, especially an American or a European, 110%, the easiest entry point into the Middle East market, without a doubt. And I always, having been there a few times now, I always joke it's the Las Vegas of the Middle East. To me, it's like more of a Western city with an Arab flair than it is a true Arab city, in my opinion. I could totally be challenged on that. I don't live there, so please.
If you would like to challenge Leen on this, please reach out to me.
But it's also one of the safest. I think it's the fifth safest city in the world.
You were talking about the benefits of living in there and the higher price, but what it comes with. I have heard of it is one of the safest places on the planet.
And it's so clean.
Yeah.
It is so clean. And
really?
I will say, if you're somebody who wants luxury and constant, so people in Dubai, tourists in Dubai, spend about 2 times more than tourists in London or New York. And that's not necessarily because of the cost, but because of the amount of amenities and activities. You can go scuba diving in the world's deepest pool.
I've seen that.
You can go skiing, indoor skiing with man-made snow.
I think Will Smith recently made a video about the scuba diving part.
Yeah,
So
you've got the Burj Khalifa, tallest building in the world.
Yeah.
You've got what's the name of it? This giant amusement park that is all these different cities from all over the world. So you go to Moscow, then you can go to Thailand, and then you can go to Latin America. And they have food and different kind of games and activities.
Sounds like the better version of I think Disney World has a version of that. Epcot.
It's like that, but I think
at a Dubai scale.
You've got botanical gardens that are out of this world, these rose sculptures, beautiful art museums. You've got the resorts on the Gulf Sea or the Persian Gulf are insane. Some of the nicest resorts I've ever seen. You've got beautiful luxury malls.
Yeah.
So it is just it gives this kind of elevated lifestyle, and you can pretty much get anything delivered to your house within 30 minutes. Because they have a bunch of people motorbikes.
Not to always bring it back to Japan, but I think about Tokyo and from everybody that I know there and that I've talked to, it's yes, you might not be able to afford the biggest, craziest apartment for cheap. It is gonna be more expensive in most places. But like you said, I like that of depending on the lifestyle you want, and if safety in your city and level of food, some places have better food than others. We won't get into that debate today, or people will fight me. But it's the quality of food and healthcare and everything else. It's just going to be better if you're willing to pay a little bit more in certain places. And dang, I can't remember who said this, but they were talking about how like the difference in why you buy a place or like rent a place is different in different places, where like in America we buy or rent a home because we want to spend all of our time there, and like the cliche of like get off your job at 5 o'clock, go home and like stay inside until the next day. And he's like, but in other places it's no, we have the smallest home possible because we plan to spend all of our time out with other people. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, so I think somebody was talking about it in Mexico of like, we have small homes because we don't spend time there unless we're sleeping. Yeah, we're out there with our friends, like eating and stuff, and like that's why the food's cheaper because we're always eating out and like hanging out with them. So yeah, same thing in Japan. So I would assume probably same thing in Dubai of like, you might not be able to afford the biggest place. Like, not everybody can afford the mansions. He's right. But like the city's so safe and like the streets are so clean and the community is so good. And I believe it's a pretty small geographically town. So like you can get around pretty quickly and like hang out with your friends and like spend your time with people instead of just like holding yourself up.
Absolutely. So I absolutely agree. And again, because of that cultural diversity, you can get any type of food that you want as well, right? You've got great options. And so I think especially for startups, like I think what I think is really interesting too is nowadays we're seeing more and more global teams, especially for startups, where you're going to have colleagues all over the world oftentimes. And being in a place like Dubai and having colleagues, whether they be in India or Pakistan or London, it's being in a place like Dubai, you're so much more centrally located, and it's easier, especially if you have a product to export, to be able to export it to the east or west from a centrally located place like Dubai. And then again, I think another thing that's very interesting is they have their own kind of ministry of digital economy, and to help push this message of why Dubai is so great, they have a new content creator visa and kind of opportunity for. They want to bring influencers into the country essentially to produce content and hopefully promote the country as a great place to be in. And part of that is tied to the 2033 vision that they have. And then you have the 2030 vision that Saudi has, and Saudi and UAE are in constant competition.
What are those? The 2030 and 2033 visions?
Essentially, these are kind of government plans or mandates that have been created and kind of outline different KPIs and goals that are getting them to be kind of the leader in the region. So for the 2033 vision in the UAE, their goal is to be the #1 international city in the world. And so a huge part of that is increasing their population, increasing kind of their economic output, and so on and so forth. And they have different things that they're kind of doing to achieve that. And so for Dubai, a huge part of it, kind of increasing their population is tied to what they believe to be a marketing play, and really utilizing influencers as part of that strategy. And very similarly, that's kind of what you're seeing in Saudi.
It's interesting you bring up let's call it influencer visa, because now more and more countries are bringing up like startup visas, and increasing them from 6 months to 1 year to 2 years. So we're seeing that. But I think this is the first time I've heard of a content creator visa.
I was listening to another podcast about Dubai property. And actually, interestingly, they were talking about more middle class properties being built in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, kind of competing for that same kind of class of families to locate there, and how they're really marketing it more to middle class families, which I think is really interesting. But kind of in listening to that, and I actually lost my train of thought. What was I just saying?
2030, 2033 plans. No worries. Yeah, we'll cut that. Don't worry. I've got a few last questions. I don't want to take up all your time, but talk to me really quickly about the free trade zones. What do you mean by that? How does that benefit startup founders looking to move into Dubai?
Amazing. So free zones exist all over the world. Yeah. And essentially they provide opportunities for 100% foreign ownership. They have kind of different tax incentives, regulatory incentives, and benefits that they can offer to really make it easy to launch and soft land your business in the country. And so you'll see free zones in Dubai and Abu Dhabi that are managed by different entities. So in Dubai, one of the free zones is managed by DTech, which is under the Dubai Silicon Oasis Authority.
Literally just spelled D-Tech.
DTech,
cool.
So it's actually, I think, it stands for the Dubai Technology and Entrepreneur
Gotcha. Just want to make sure we're not getting that in deep tech mixed up. Yeah. D-Tech, yeah.
So
yeah.
DTEC. And so yes, they operate the free zone, one of the free zones in Dubai. And that's essentially kind of what they're able to provide, right? 100% free ownership. They have different incentives that they can get, help you with taxes. Everything that you could need is in-house. Like that's the goal, is that you don't actually need to leave the free zone to do anything. You can do it all. You can open your bank account within the free zone. You can set up your commercial registration within the free zone. You can get an attorney to work with you. Kind of, it's a one-stop shop. It's kind of how they're designed. And so, that's, D-Tech is an organization that Generator is, kind of exploring collaboration with. Kind of with a similar concept of like, how can we support startups that have application to Dubai? Because that's the other thing, is that Dubai presents a really interesting market. One of the areas that I'm most excited to explore across the UAE and more throughout the GCC is the shift from natural resources into renewable energy and using, decades of oil profits to not only accelerate technology, and you're seeing that's kind of the huge shift, right? They're all kind of trying to invest now. Traditionally, investors in the Middle East have been doing a ton of property investment. So that's why you're seeing all of these skyscrapers popping up. And I believe Saudi Arabia at one point in Riyadh held the world record for the most cranes in the sky at any given moment because of how much development is actively happening. And so now there's a lot of education for these investors, and a lot of them are coming from high net worth families, family offices that kind of are trickling down wealth from.
So that actually kind of leads to my next question of like, they have had these decades of oil investment, like money just coming in because of their oil. It is a non-renewable energy. So eventually, I don't know if it's 5 years from now, 100 years from now, it could run out. I feel like every year we find like a new, diff of like, oh, we're gonna run out. Oh, we found like the largest oil reserve in the world right here. I'm like, okay, we don't know. But like, where do you see most of the investment for these funds, for these startups? Where is it is it government? Is it from the sheiks? Am I saying that right? Is it from like the royal families? Like, where is it coming from?
That's a great question. So I would say you've got kind of two main buckets of opportunity. So in terms of venture capital firms, we're definitely seeing a good number of them relocating to the Middle East, new firms starting in the Middle East. But still, by and large, the majority of investment starts coming from family offices, angel investors, and high net worth individuals. And then a lot of that is kind of coming from the privately owned kind of wealth from oil and gas in the region. Which is also controlled, by the different emirates and the different sheikhs and royal families that oversee those. And the sheikhs themselves are directly investing in companies. I met with one of the offices of a sheikh in Dubai who was looking at Water Lily, an AI-driven insurance company that went through one of our accelerators in the United States and is based in the US. They're looking at them for investment. Nice. And not even necessarily because of the application to Dubai, they just want to find the best startups. He's interested to find the best startups in the world and investing. And so I think it's a lot of more, again, with the younger generation kind of coming in to kind of control some of this wealth. You're seeing more emerging fund managers and kind of, there's a lot of education with these wealthier family offices about venture capital, why it's a worthwhile investment. They're all AI.
Of course.
So a lot of
some things are the same all over the world,
And so for us, it's like narrowing that focus down of like, well, why? Okay, so AI is so broad, as we know. So do we want to focus on AI and insurance, or AI and renewable energy, what have you? I think you're seeing some of that, and then you also have these really large kind of public investment funds. So I'm less familiar with some of them in UAE, but for example in Saudi you have SVC, which is a really notable one, and they'll anchor up to 60 to 75% of a fund that will be directly investing into startups. And so there are a lot of government mandated funds and sovereign wealth funds and et cetera that can also be used to directly invest in companies. So I think that's a lot of what we're seeing now, and so working directly with those offices to understand what their priorities are, what types of companies, because it depends. For Sharjah, so you have the Sharjah the Sharjah Research, Technology and Innovation Park. So I mentioned Sharjah is the third largest Emirates. They're really particularly, because they're the closest to the Gulf of the Emirates, they're particularly interested in desalinization. And because it has a real application to their geographic
Yeah, clean water from this ocean right there.
Exactly. Right, because we all know that direction that we're headed, clean water is definitely going to be a concern. And similarly, waste management as well is another really big focus of theirs. And so they're thinking about the sustainability space quite heavily, which I think is really fascinating. And then are bringing in different corporates, predominantly in the oil and gas space, to help fund accelerators and invest as well, which I think is really fascinating. And so yeah, it's a really interesting place to be fundraising, without a doubt. But I will caution folks. There, one very real misconception is this idea that I'm going to go over to the Middle East and there's all this oil money and it's so wealthy. I'm gonna get investment like that. I'm just gonna walk in and I'm gonna be a wealthy investor. And that is not the case, right? There's the investors in these markets. They know that that's a misconception, especially that the West has of them. And these are very sophisticated investors, right? Like they're doing their due diligence. They're really looking into these companies and considering this stuff quite heavily. You have a very highly educated population. I mean, the majority of working adults have college degrees. You have a very large number of PhDs in the country compared to other parts of the world. And that's the other thing I think I may have mentioned, but part of the reason they're seeing so much talent attraction is because the pay is really high there. Like so you're seeing base pay much higher in a place like UAE comparatively.
That kind of leads into my last question of, if I'm an American interested in like the Middle East or interested in like raising a fund or raising money for my startup from there, what are some misconceptions? And if it's my first time ever going there, what do I need to know in advance? To like be prepared for it.
Absolutely. And so I would definitely say that the UAE and in Dubai, as I mentioned earlier, is a great entry point for American startups and American entrepreneurs looking to explore the market for the first time. I think that you should come into it with a very similar expectation of, how traditional venture capital works in terms of timelines, due diligence, and things like that. But it's a relationship-based culture, and especially if you're going for money through, one of the offices of the Sheikh or a family office, and because despite being 11% of the population, the Emiratis do still hold a good majority of the wealth in the country, and many of them are shifting into venture capital investment. And so as part of that, it is relationship building, and it really is taking the time to get to know your investor. They're very much so based around breaking bread. You're going to do dinners. You're going to really.
I'm down for that.
Yeah, and I love that part of the culture, and I think that's really, really beautiful. But again, because it's such an international hub, you have a ton of venture capital firms and investors from Europe, from Asia, from Africa, and from the United States. So it's not like by and large you're going to be raising from Emiratis. You're going to be raising from venture capitalists from all over the world because it's such an international hub. And so that's something that I would keep in mind. And then the other thing is, depending on who you're raising from in the country, especially if you're looking at any of the family offices or the sheikhs and kind of actual Emiratis, it is a religious-based community. Islam is still the dominant religion in the country. The Arab nationals are still the leading population in the country. You're not going to get by with like anything related to drugs and alcohol. Alcohol is sold and consumed in the UAE. You can do it pretty much anything you want over there. The gambling stuff, anything to do with gambling, drugs, alcohol, anything that would be considered kind of against the religion is going to be difficult to find for out there. If those are kind of if you're trying to raise a family office or one of the kind of privately held offices by an Emirati there. So that's something to keep in mind. It might be a little bit different, but you'll see that even here in the U.S. Right? Like there's public funds that can invest in that type of stuff, whether it be cannabis or what have you. So that's another thing just to keep in mind.
Which, same point I always tell my students, it's not about just finding money, it's about finding the right investor. So, Awesome. Well, we'll wrap it up there, and I don't want to take up your entire day. We could definitely keep going on, but yeah, another time. Yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, we'll keep going on from there. But thank you so much, Leen. I appreciate your time.